What's up, Cape League fans, and welcome to another episode of the Cape League podcast. I'm your host, Steven Scanlon, and on today's episode, we have an interview with former Harwich Mariner and current Minnesota Twin, Taylor Rogers. The former Kentucky Wildcat was a member of the 2011 Harwich team that won the championship, and he was selected as a Cape League All-Star. The following year, Taylor was drafted by the Minnesota Twins and made his MLB debut in 2016. So, let's get into the interview. Here he is, Taylor Rogers.
All right, we now welcome on former Cape League champion for the 2011 Harwich Mariners and current pitcher for the Minnesota Twins, Taylor Rogers. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Taylor. What's going on, man?
Hey, not much. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to do this.
Yeah, I mean, we really appreciate you coming on. You're actually our first player interview, and, I'm super psyched. You had a huge year last year for the Twins, so, congratulations there. And, it seems like the Cape League played a pretty big part in your life, so now let's get right down into it. You played at Kentucky. When was the first time you heard about the Cape League, and how were you approached to join the league?
Once you got into college baseball, you kind of start to hear about the Cape, and like the best players in college baseball go up there, and you always kind of hope one day maybe you can do that too. And it was fall of my sophomore year. I had a teammate who was a year older than me and had been in the Cape previously. His name was Braden Kaptine, and he played for Harwich. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing this summer?" And I was like, "Well, nothing. That's a long ways away." And he said, "Well, would you want to play for the team I played for last year up in Cape Cod?" And I said, "Absolutely." I said, "How do we get this going?" And he said, "Well, I'll just tell them you're interested, and I think the rest will take care of itself." So that's kind of the way it worked. I think Steve Engler talked to my coach, Gary Henderson, and we got it wrapped up. And before Thanksgiving, I already had plans to go up there for the summer. So it was definitely super exciting, and something I'll always remember, kind of how it panned out.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. I don't hear too much that it was like a player referral almost. So, it definitely seems like a little bit of a fraternity there. But, so you mentioned you had plans to go to the Cape, before you joined the league. Was this your first ever experience going to Cape Cod and being in this area?
It was, yeah. Had never been to the Northeast before. And
interesting.
Yeah. Obviously going to Kentucky, I kind of had a feel for meeting people with different accents. And Kentucky is unique. You have some people from Illinois and Ohio, and they're coming south for school, and you have a couple of people from Kentucky, and so you have a lot of accents going on just at the school in general. So going up to Boston area and stuff was a new accent for me, but was definitely used to that, and it was fun to kind of jab at people. And they're like, "Man, you have a weird accent," and I was like, "No, you do."
No, you do. Yeah. No, I know that. I mean, being from the Cape myself and now living in Boston, it's definitely a very unique one. I'll leave it at that. Mm-hmm. But so what were your initial feelings like? Going to a place you've never been before, and wanting to go out and really show who you are. I mean, did you have any concerns, kind of going to be out on your own?
Not really. I think going to college, kind of far away, kind of prepared me for that. It was more so kind of being the new kid at school is what I kind of thought it was going to be. Not knowing anybody, be by myself. I always had a twin brother growing up too. So I never really had to do things on my own and, introduce myself to people and get to know people on my own. I always had my brother by my side. So I was worried about that. But then once I got up there and realized everybody was in the same boat as me, that made it a lot easier. And the way the coaching staff was, they had been accustomed to that dynamic, year after year. Sure. So it was a pretty smooth process after that.
Well, that's good. But, one thing I did want to ask you about, because it seemed like this was kind of a funny story, was, how did you get to the Cape?
Yeah. So I had a 1999 Jeep Wrangler, and the AC and the heat did not work in it. And the radiator was having some problems. So I could only go it sucked up gas. I could only go about 150 miles on a gas tank. So I'm driving up through, West Virginia and all that in the middle of summer with the windows down. And, I could only go about 55 miles an hour as well. So it took me a while. I had to print out old school MapQuest directions And it was a neat experience looking back on it. But at that time, I was pretty pissed about driving a box, kind of a heat box. But it was fun, man. I'm glad the Jeep made it there and back. And I got to find out, in New Jersey, you don't pump your own gas. That was interesting. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, in Jersey, yeah, they pump their fists, not their gas. So yeah, that's their thing they got going down there. But so did you even you didn't even have a soft top, so you had to stay with the hard top and really kind of melt in there.
I did. It was interesting, and then you have all your stuff in the back, and there's not a lot of room in the back of those things either. So had it packed to the brim, couldn't see out the rearview mirror, and yeah, it was a neat experience. I think if I would have got pulled over or broken down, people would be asking some questions.
No doubts there. That's for sure. Especially when you get up to these parts. But one thing that is super unique about the Cape League, and I really wanted to get your opinion on this because it sounds like you had an incredible experience. Is host families. Because I myself, I did a study abroad experience, and I checked places off my list because I was like, I don't want to live with another family. So what were your thoughts kind of going into that situation? How did it all go for you?
Yeah, so I had previous experience with a host family when I played a summer league after high school in Cincinnati, Ohio. That was my first experience with a host family, and kind of got a knowledge of what that was all about. And that's another reason I want to do this podcast, is kind of shed some light on what host families do, because it's kind of a thankless task. And you're opening your house up to somebody you don't know. Myself, I would feel awkward letting a college kid come live with me. That would just be kind of weird.
Yeah,
but I think that's what's cool and unique about the Cape League is you do the host families, and they are great. That's something that they do every year, so they make the transition pretty seamless. And my host family in particular, I was super lucky. I got to live with the Novaks, and the way it worked is I got to the Cape and you meet at a central location house, and then you grab your jersey, and then they give you an address to your host family. Well, back then, I had a flip phone, so you don't just pull up the address on your iPhone. And so they kind of gave me the old school directions, like you take your right out of here, go down, go past the grocery store. If you hit the 7-Eleven, you've gone too far.
Gone too far.
Yeah. So anyway, I found it. It was an incredible house. It was on the Harwich Harbor there, and I thought I was at the wrong place because it was so nice. And I get there, and the wife, Carol, was there and greeted me, and just really cool. We did the exchange of pleasantries, and obviously I was nervous, and I think she was a little bit too, but we got to know each other as the summer went along, and I still text them, try to text them every time we play the Red Sox, because I think of them and kind of what they did for me. So yeah, that's one of the coolest things about the Cape League, and I don't think those host families get enough credit.
No, I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, I have a family friend who, her family, they do the host family stuff, and, they have a house in the Cape, do it every summer, and they absolutely love it. And I think that a lot of families, especially on the Cape, more of growing up with kids, and once the kids get out of the house, I think they would really love this type of an opportunity. So just hearing how important it was for you, and how, it meant a lot to you, I think, there are a lot of families out there that would like to make a difference, and hopefully, this podcast can help shed some light on that, and, get some more families involved. That'd be great. Mm-hmm. But, shifting back towards kind of more of the baseball focus, what was your mindset like coming into the Cape League? Were you kind of more focused on developing your game and staying in shape, or were you trying to put yourself on the map?
I was trying to put myself on the map. I had a pretty bad sophomore season. And I kind of wanted to rewrite my script. And I felt that going up to the Cape and playing against the good competition, I could kind of reinsert myself into the, the higher portion of the draft. And that was my big goal, is to kind of just change what my sophomore season was, because I didn't feel comfortable with the way it ended at Kentucky. So that was my big goal, was to get up there and actually, compete and actually do well, and not just try to get noticed or use it as a time killer or anything like that. I wanted to go up there and prove myself.
Awesome. No, and that's good, because I there's always some different personas who are in the league. So sometimes, you have the guys who are really focused on trying to, make it to the bigs like yourself. And then, I've talked to some people who are more just like, like I really just needed to correct some things for my college season so I could, be as best as I could for them. But, you kind of mentioned your coach, Steve Engler. I mean, he is one of the more seasoned coaches at the Cape League. How was his influence helpful, not only in terms of your development, but like bringing the team together? Because you only have a few days before the season starts.
Right. Yeah, and that he made it so easy. He's knows the background of that. He knows all the players, don't know anybody, and it's like first day of school kind of thing. So he made that pretty seamless, and he brought in kind of a pro ball feel to it. It was show up on time, and I'm not going to be on you about doing your stuff. It's up to you to get what you needed to get done. But his only thing was showing up on time. If you were late, he had to wash his caddy. That was his only rule. So yeah, that's what was really cool about it. It was definitely kind of preparing you for pro ball, because it was like, look, we're going to play a game every day, and there's no school, and I'm going to let you be an adult until you prove me otherwise. So I really love that aspect of it, and that really really showed me that that's what I wanted to do was get into pro ball and get my shot in pro ball, because I really liked the way that style was set up.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to my next question, especially with your coach and bringing the team together. It seemed like he kind of empowered you guys to go out and do your thing, but what was the culture like among the other players involved? Because obviously you guys only knew each other for a few days. Maybe you knew a couple of guys beforehand, but you guys only knew each other for a few days. How did you guys all come together as one and really try to get strong relationships quickly?
It was easy. Baseball guys are all the same, kind of. It doesn't really matter like what school you were at or where you were from. We were kind of all in the same boat together, and we were kind of automatically friends. It's just kind of the way it happened. And, I think that may have had an impact on why we won the championship, because we gelled so quickly and it was easy. We didn't have to force any of it. Everybody was just automatically friends. And, we kind of hung out outside the park a little bit and got to know each other that way. So I really do think the camaraderie, stemmed from that. And that may have what propelled us to the championship.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I can definitely see that. You always hear when teams win the championship, they always mention, it's a special group. So, I mean, it definitely seems like you guys did. I mean, obviously, like you said, you won the championship, got a nice fat ring out of it. But, now that you're in the bigs, do you still talk to some of your current teammates, from the Harwich, or like even other guys around the league who played in the Cape League?
Yeah, certainly. The teammates from the Harwich team, it's cool with social media. You can kind of keep up with their life and see what they're up to. Some guys are now, have kids, and, we're scattered around the country. So that's pretty cool. And I'll get a text here and there from guys where they'll say, hey, I'll be at the game tomorrow, and stuff like that. So you just say hi. But, you talk to teammates, now in the major leagues, like Tyler Duffy and guys like that. When you're in the bullpen and it's, the middle of the fourth inning and the song's playing in between innings, hey, what team did you play for in the Cape? And then then that gets the ball rolling, and everybody talks about kind of memories of the Cape. Oh, you played for YD. Like, how many donut burgers did you eat that summer? And they're like, man, I lost count. Ate way too many of those. So everybody's got stories, and when you talk to people, you kind of realize how cool that is and what a privilege it is to play in that league.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny that you bring up the donut burgers, because it's always something that comes up, and that's one of my favorite things about the Cape League, I think. And now that I'm doing this podcast, is it really does seem like it's a fraternity among you guys, like very similar to like the Heisman. When people win the Heisman, they're all kind of connected forever. So like, is that kind of like the feeling that you get when you're talking to these guys? It's like, wow, we all have this little thing in common, and like it is.
Yeah,
like
certainly. It's one of those deals you kind of know what they went through because you did the same thing, and it's just a mutual respect. And what else is cool is you talk to people on the street, or you get paired with some guy on the golf course, and he goes, you hear you played college baseball, and he goes, oh, you must have played the Cape then. I say, yeah, and then they'll kind of tell their story or how they're connected to the Cape League or of some sorts, or know somebody that did. And I think it's just cool, once people put together that you're in pro ball and that you played college, they automatically just think, well, you must have played in the Cape then. And that's usually true.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember I used to work at the Cape Cod Mall, and, the guys would always come in because I worked at a sports store there, and you just see these massive athletic kids, and right away I'm just like, you play for the Cape League, don't you? Yeah, I do know. So I definitely know that feeling. But, I remember this year a lot because I was still living on the Cape at the time, and I actually got to see you pitch twice. One time was, I think, one of the best games I saw you pitch, and that was against the Eastern in the Eastern Final against YD. What was that atmosphere like for you? And, what do you remember about that
Really
game?
cool. So I was so excited to pitch in some playoff baseball because Kentucky that year, we didn't make a regional or anything. So our season, kind of was cut short in that regard. We didn't get any postseason play. So that was my first taste of postseason that year. So I was super jacked. And all I wanted to do was give the team a chance to get to the championship. I knew I wasn't going to play in that game, but I wanted to get there and get a chance to get a ring. So I remember during batting practice, everybody takes the yellow school bus together. And, as a starting pitcher during batting practice and stuff, you're kind of just sitting in the dugout on a wood bench, kind of just, twiddling your thumbs a little bit, killing time. So I went over and I got one of those donut burgers and had a donut burger pregame.
There you go.
When you're in college, it doesn't really matter. You can eat whatever and be just fine. So, I don't remember too much about the game itself. I do remember going pretty deep in the game, which was nice. Kind of saved the bullpen for the championship game, and that ended up, being a big factor for us because we were able to kind of deploy our best bullpen arms in the championship game instead of trying to just get to the championship game using our best bullpen arms.
Yeah, no, I remember that because you guys used a lot of guys. It was pretty much all hands on deck at that point, and you could tell it definitely made an impact in that championship game. But because you were so successful throughout that season, you had the opportunity to play for the Cape League All Stars, and at the time that's when all the games were being done at Fenway Park. So for you go out there facing the best competition in the Cape League, you get the win in the game. But I mean, what was that like to go out on a historic ballpark like Fenway and then going out?
Man, it was unbelievable. That's what you dream of. When I got to the Cape League, I didn't know that was the thing. And once you find out the All-Star game was at Fenway Park, I was like, all right, I'm gunning for that. I don't even care where the team finishes anymore. It's all about the All-Star game. But that was cool. Yeah, we took the bus. Actually, we got one of the charter buses over there. So I was like, oh, this is a big deal. Yeah.
There you go.
And,
moving up.
Again, since I was starting the game, I didn't do anything for batting practice. So I was just sitting around taking in the sights, took some pictures by the monster, did the whole deal like people do at Fenway. And they had the little door open. So I went inside the monster and I'm like, man, this is so cool. I may never get a chance to do this. So I'm really glad I have this opportunity. And we were the visiting team. So I was, pitching the bottom of the first. And I think I was ready to go probably 40 minutes before the game even started. The pitching coach there was like, hey, slow down, keep slowing down. And I just couldn't. It was way too excited. Mm-hmm. And the other cool part was after the game, since I did get the win, I went into the little media room and did a little press conference thing. And that was awesome, too. I was like, man, this is what the big leaguers must do. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Oh,
and
for sure.
My parents flew out for the game, too, so I got some pictures with them. They took some pictures from the stands, so always have good keepsakes from that. And definitely think about it every time we're playing the Red Sox. I remember that game.
Yeah, that's so cool because I remember I was sitting along the third baseline for that game, and I remember distinctly when you got the win, and they were showing all the stats on the big screen for the game, and I remember seeing winning pitcher was Taylor Rogers, and I meant to know myself. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna keep an eye on this guy. Let's see if he makes it to the league, and sure enough, here you are, and obviously, I'm sure the Cape League played a role in that, but. Looking back on your time in the Cape League and how successful was it, how did that summer really help you to get to where you are today?
I think that pro ball atmosphere, once you get to pro ball, you kind of have an idea of what it's going to be like and the way it's going to be structured. Mm-hmm. And once I got to pro ball, it was like, I just felt like I was in the Cape again. You report to the short season team, and the ballparks are similar to the Cape League, and same kind of thing. You have a bunch of college kind of all stars, that had got drafted, and it felt like I was back in the Cape. So definitely was prepared more so for for professional baseball after playing in the Cape.
I mean, that's great to hear, man. I know that's what the Cape League shoots for, but so after that summer, you get back up to Kentucky and you start playing your season in the spring. Did you notice any more attention around yourself because of what you did in the Cape League?
There was, yeah. There definitely had a little more. That was right about the time when they were doing like draft rankings and stuff like that. It was still kind of hodgepodge, but I definitely had a little more of a following for potential draft pick and everything like that, and where they think your season's going to go after. It's just a good kind of benchmark for the scouts and the reporters to kind of revert back to and say, all right, this guy had a good year in the Cape. There's no reason why he wouldn't have a good year in the SEC either. So definitely had a little bit more exposure after playing in the Cape.
Awesome. I mean, that's great. But, one thing I always like to ask when I get to interview people like yourself is, away from playing in the games, living on the Cape that summer, what were some of the things that you were doing for fun, whether it's like with your teammates or with your host family? Does anything kind of pop out to you?
Certainly. So the host family took me fishing on their boat quite a few times, which was awesome. It was really cool to be out there and kind of see the Cape from the water and really get a feel for the way it looks. And I really think it's a unique place because you kind of feel like you're in a small town a little bit. But it's very unique and very interesting out there. Love it. And we played some golf courses, a couple golf courses, that date back to the early 1900s. It's just pretty cool to think about all the players that have been on that course too. And with teammates outside of baseball, we went to a pub that was the Hot Stove. We went over there, and there was a pizza place in town, that supported the Harwich Mariners a lot. They had pictures up in the place of past Harwich championship teams and everything like that. So that was pretty cool. Other than that, though, there really wasn't much. We went to the beach quite a few times and just hung out on the beach, on off days and stuff. But mostly I just remember being at the ballpark. As a starter, I would always go sit in the bullpen and talk to everybody in the bullpen. And man, we didn't pay attention one lick down there. It was just hanging out with all the guys, in a confined space. And then that's where you really get to know people and get close with people is doing stuff like that. And that's a credit to Steve Engler, letting me do that. If I'm as a starter, I'm not doing anything. So I don't want to hang with the position players. We don't have anything in common.
No, I hear that. And you kind of brought something up there that I wanted to touch on because obviously, the fields that you play on in the Cape League are not the same that you play in, at college or even in the pro level. And, the fans are right there. Like, I remember I would walk behind the bullpen like all the time when I was growing up as a kid. Was that kind of cool for you to be like, right there, like with the fans and having them interact with you?
Certainly. Again, that's one of the things that prepares you for pro ball is that fan interaction. Sometimes guys would come down there and, start talking trash to the bullpen. And that's exactly what happens in pro ball. Same deal. It's not a hello, how you doing? It's, you're trash. So that was another aspect that kind of prepares you for pro ball a little bit. And, Steve let me I got to water the field every day. With firefighters in my family, that's all I wanted to do was handle the hose and water the field. And then also what I did is we'd walk through the stands and do the 50-50 raffle, which was pretty cool. So I'd always do that in the first couple innings and then slide down to the bullpen and talk trash to the bullpen guys.
There you go. Yeah, I know that. Now, there's being a starting pitcher, it is a little bit of a different position because, like you said, you pitch once and then you don't pitch again for, 4 days. Can you kind of give us a look on, what that looks like for you from like a preparation standpoint? Because I don't think a lot of people really understand kind of what goes on behind the scenes.
And that was another thing
pitching.
the pitching coach there helped the starting pitchers with, because, in college you're only pitching once a week. So you have that routine down to where you're pitching once a week. And once you do every 5 days, that kind of changes your mindset a little bit. And he had played pro ball with the White Sox. So he said, this is kind of what I did, and this is what other guys do, pro ball for every 5 days. So he said, give this a shot. You can tweak things here and there, but this is kind of the way things are done in professional baseball. So I jumped full in. I'm like, well, this is what I want to do. So let's start getting a routine together for every 5 days. And that was another aspect of learning. So we did a bullpen, your second day off, you'd pitch in the game, you'd have a day off, and then you'd throw a bullpen. And that's where I really learned that bullpen session that's where you work on stuff, and that's where you work to try to get better. So definitely thankful to have that experience. So I didn't have to necessarily learn that once I got to pro ball. I felt like I was a step ahead once I got there.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he was a great pitching coach to have. So it's game day for you. You're getting ready. You're getting into your routine. Do you have any sort of special routine you do? And also from a mentality standpoint, I was a college soccer player, so I was one of those kids on a game day. The moment I walked into the locker room, like I wouldn't talk to anybody. It was game time, super focused, and that's how I went about it. But then I had teammates who were more like juggling a soccer ball, laughing and stuff like that. So I'm just kind of curious, how do you approach it on game day to get yourself ready?
I'm not the superstitious type. Definitely not the type to be silent or, don't talk to me kind of guy. I try to stay happy-go-lucky. Obviously there's some nerves attached to it, but yeah, most of the time I'm watching the clock, trying to get the time to speed up and trying to be regimented. Once it's usually about a half hour before the game is when I'd start to get going. So once that happened, I tried to be real regimented about how I went about my business a half hour before the game. But leading up until that, just do whatever kind of comes and talk to people and see what we did. Another thing we used to do on the days you weren't starting at home, the home team takes BP first. So we used to, once BP was over, all the pitchers, we would jump in cars and we'd go to the gas station and get sunflower seeds and Gatorades and stuff for the game while the other team was taking batting practice. And I just thought that was really cool that, that Steve let us do that too, because he trusted us to go do it. And he said, I trust you now, and just don't give me a reason not to trust you. And that was pretty cool. So those days I wasn't pitching, I definitely was getting some candy bars and some Slurpees from the gas station.
There you go. Yeah, the Slurpees from 7-Eleven. It's always a key staple, I feel like. So I just have two last questions for you, and it's actually kind of about your pro stuff you have going on. So, you made your debut, I think it was back at the beginning of the season in 2016. Do you remember what was kind of going through your head when you finally, not only got the call to go up, but then, the first time you walked out?
Certainly, yeah. It's probably just like anybody else. You can't feel your legs. You can't feel yourself breathing, and the heart rate's just through the roof. And it's just something you've thought about since you were a child, and that day finally comes, you don't really know how to react. And to get through my debut without giving up a run or anything was probably big in the grand scheme of things.
Oh yeah.
But that was a different dynamic too. I had got there and the ball club was 0-9 at the time. So I got to the clubhouse. It's the greatest day of my life. And I get in there and it's a little bit more of a somber mood. So I kind of had to check myself and make sure I wasn't out of line in the clubhouse. Definitely, being that rookie who's all excited to be there. And these guys are more, business, trying to get the season turned around. So there was a lot going on. Logistical stuff, once you get called up, is a lot. The game is kind of secondary to everything else. You're making sure your family, has their tickets and that they're okay, in their hotel rooms. You're trying to make sure you're on time for batting practice, and, you got to grab, the bullpen bag. You do all your rookie duties, and you're trying to stay out of the way of the veterans and everything like that. You're talking to media about what you think about, being here for the first time. So the game's kind of secondary. Once you're trying to you take care of all the other stuff around you.
Oh, I bet. I mean, I think one movie that comes to mind when you start talking about that was
Mm-hmm.
The Rookie with Dennis Quaid. Right, because I think they kind of showed that piece, pretty well. Because you see him like going through that, like, no, I gotta get like tickets to my family. Like he gets the call, it's all exciting. So that's definitely good to know. And you said something interesting. The team being 0-9. How is it like being the new guy going in, and were they really receptive to you and like kind of bringing you in right away?
A little
like,
bit,
like?
guys. Some guys were, some guys weren't. I developed a relationship with a couple of them in camp that year, so that was good. And a couple of them, are not so excited to say hi to you. The thing that helped me was Joe Mauer came up and introduced himself. He says, "I'm Joe Mauer." I'm like, "I know who you are, Joe." But the fact that he came over
Yeah.
and made the time and said hello, I took a deep breath and was like, okay, everything's okay now. We can kind of get on with our work. And another bullpen pitcher, came up to me. I was trying to stay out of everybody's way to get warmed up and doing your bands and everything. And he said, "Hey man, you're here to do a job just as much as everybody else is. Make sure you're preparing as you would." And I was like, well, this is great. I feel more comfortable. And, a funny story about that is when I got called up, the team was at home in Minnesota, and the general manager, Terry Ryan, picked me up from the airport. So I was like, this is pretty cool. And, so he picks me up, and I get in the car, and he goes, "How you doing?" I'm like, well, I'm as good as I can be, as good as I've ever been. And I said, well, how are you doing? And that's when I realized what was going on, because he goes, "Well, it's not too fruitful here right now." I was like, "Oh yeah, okay." So that's when I realized I need to check myself at the door, because other things are going on outside of just yourself.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, now I think it's pretty safe to say that you're kind of you may be one of those leaders now in the clubhouse. I mean, last year seems like it was a really big year for you. I mean, you started off as the setup man, and then by the end of the year, you were the closer. Got 30 saves. Had a ton of strikeouts. I mean, what was last season like for you, especially starting off in one role and then your role changing?
It's another one of those progressions. I feel like last year was my fourth year, and that was right about the time the game starts to slow down a little bit for you. When you get a feel for the road cities. I think that's the biggest thing as my career's gone on is, you're going to these different parks, and you know where the clubhouse is when you get there. You kind of start to get to know the clubbies on the road. So you just feel more comfortable, and you know what to expect when you're on the road. And I think that's a big deal, because now you can just specifically focus on the game and your craft. Whereas before, your first time in Yankee Stadium, you're kind of looking up the whole time. And you're figuring out, hey, I'm in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
Whereas now you're kind of like, okay, I know what to expect at Yankee Stadium, and now it's time to just get down to business and play baseball.
Oh, right. No, that's awesome. And I think there's no, there's definitely a reason why you are where you are. And it seems like you just have a great mental approach to the game. Last question for you is, now being in the league for a few years, you probably have played in all the stadiums just about at this point. Is there any stadium that like is your favorite to play in or really sticks out to you?
Yeah, not just because we're doing this podcast. Fenway is definitely up there on the list. The historicness of it, and then obviously my personal experience with it. That's one of my favorites. You can't beat Fenway Park in Boston. I love that city, and and not just because I'm with the Twins either. Target Field is one of the better ones. It's so nice and classy, and a day game at Target Field in July, you just cannot beat it. So once you say, like you say, it's when you're in a big league stadium, it's hard to complain.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I know that's a newer stadium for the Twins too, because I remember the old one, but I think it was like more of a dome setup, and the balls would always get lost up in the rafters up there. But it seems like where you guys play now is pretty incredible. But yeah, I mean, Taylor, I think I can speak for the entire league. I mean, you are a great example for what could be for a lot of people coming into the Cape League, and I think your story is really awesome. And I know that we're all going to be keeping an eye on your career, and we're all hoping.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to hopefully shed some light on the league a little bit. I think I could speak for everybody and say that definitely have a soft spot in the heart for the league and memories for everybody, and not just for the guys that have made it to the major leagues, but guys that didn't. I know that summer really made an impact on them.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear, and what's crazy too is the impact that you all make, not only on the volunteers that go, but the fans too. I mean, I still have memories of you pitching out there, and the stuff that I'm never going to forget. So, we all, as a local, I can say thank you from everyone.
Cool, thank you very much.
Keep up the good
thank
work.
you for having me.
That concludes this episode of the Cape League Podcast. Thank you again to Taylor for an awesome conversation. Don't forget, follow us on Twitter at Cape League Pod and on Instagram at Cape League Podcast. Tune into our episode next week where we'll be interviewing former Falmouth Commodore Mark Hamilton. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.